Hi everyone, welcome to the second session of the English language GCSE writing course. Our aim basically with these sessions is to help you with your creative writing, help you with being able to be more descriptive in that, to form better characters and better narratives, and then also to be looking at transactional writing, which will be in later weeks. So basically giving you a toolkit of everything you need to really ace those parts of your GCSE language exam. So last week we went through character arcs and narrative types. If you didn't watch that video, I highly recommend that you go back and watch that. If you don't know much about character arcs and narrative types, it's a game changer in terms of how you can structure your creative pieces. It's going to make your pieces so much better. If you get nothing else from these videos, just listen to me, please. Plan your work, plan your creative stories, plan your transactional pieces. If you don't, I swear to you, I can tell as an examiner, I can see the students that have planned and I can see the students that haven't. So just give it 5 minutes, give it 10 minutes, breathe, get your ideas down properly, and then write, okay? Okay, good. So we're going to go now into the second week, which is looking at the 5 senses and focal points. Sorry about the camera, that's my fault. So we're going to be doing that today, 5 senses and FOPS or FOPPS, excuse me. So today's lesson really is purely going to be looking at how to write more descriptively. And what's interesting is if you can write more fluently descriptively, you're actually also going to be writing better characters. There was a video that I did earlier today, English language, the reading section, looking at word choices and things. And again, I highly recommend you go check that video out if you want some help with your analysis section. But what we worked out as we were going through the piece today is that actually a lot of what we learned about the character, her name was Alice, was actually through the setting and the way that she interacted with the setting. So if you can do a really good job of describing the setting and describing particularly through the 5 senses, which is what we're going to cover today, then you are actually going to be boosting your abilities with, you're going to be boosting your abilities with description generally and also characterization, as it's called, building characters. So let's start with the absolute basics. There's a good chance no one's gone through this with you before, is the crazy thing. So when you're writing a piece, obviously, you will have known about the 5 senses, right? So you've got vision, you've got sight, you've got hearing, so what you hear, your sounds, you've got smell, so what you smell, you've got touch, so you know what you feel, and you've got taste, so you know flavors and yeah, sense of taste. You've probably heard about that. You've maybe not been given specific kind of ways to dive deeper into that. So with vision, think about describing shapes, sizes, and colors. And annoyingly, because Google thinks that because I'm in America, Google basically Google wants me to get rid of the U, but I'm proud of my British spelling, so I will keep that U in there. Thank you very much. So shapes, sizes, and colors. You can literally think of this as a checklist that you can remember and even potentially write down in your exam somewhere, because over the course of a written piece, especially a descriptive piece, so many of the marks will come from whether you've used the 5 senses well, as well as obviously you want to use language devices. We'll talk about that in another session. But so vision, shapes, sizes, colors. This will help. This is probably the part of 5 senses you are best at, because from very young children, whenever you've done creative writing, you've probably been taught to use colors, you know, red, blue, green, whatever. You've probably also been taught to use sizes, big, small, whatever, and shapes as well, rounds, you know, circular, spherical, oblongs, squares. I don't know why I'm just doing loads of shapes here, but you've probably been taught these things fairly well. My first comment as GCSE students is don't go quite so basic. Yeah, so don't say red when you could say scarlet or burgundy or whatever. Like, go a bit deeper now. Try and be a bit more vivid in your descriptions, but ultimately shape, sizes, colors, right? Hearing, pitch, tone, volume. And you can also, with this one, obviously, you can include onomatopoeia as well. Fine, I'll spell it out. Matopia. It's not right. I put an O. Yeah, onomatopoeia. So bang, crash, whip, whatever. But also the pitches of things, the tones of things, and the volume of things. You probably don't do as good a job of that. Like just saying, it's good for you to try and add more of your sense of hearing throughout. So make sure in your next written piece, creative piece, that you try to consciously add some audible sense, yeah, some hearing. And that's going to really, really help you. Then there's the sense of smell. With the sense of smell, this is one of the hardest ones in some sense. You normally are going to just relate it to the strength of a smell, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant. There are plenty of other words you can use as well. So I've put a little list here for you. I was doing my favorite meal with one of my students the other day. So I ended up talking about mac and cheese, which is one of my favorite meals. And we were thinking about bacon, like bacon bits in mac and cheese. And obviously that can create a smoky smell. So there's smoky there. But there's also cheesy, antiseptic. You know what I mean by that smell, like that medicinal smell. Fresh, fruity, grassy, salty, sharp, rotten, fragrant, whatever. Internalize some of this list, learn some of this list, help yourselves by using a list like this, add some of this description into your pieces, add some of this description. It's as simple as that, okay? And whether it's, you know, pleasant or unpleasant, that's kind of obvious normally. You know, if you're writing a setting in like a bathroom stall, it's probably not going to be very pleasant. Whereas if you're in a 5-star hotel, in a restaurant, whatever, more likely going to be pleasant. But so the strength of the smells, the different words for the smells, try and add this into your piece. Then sense of touch. This one is often overlooked as well. And it's such a shame because it's such an important sense. So with touch, you can talk about textures, surfaces, and temperatures. So textures is probably the easiest one in some sense. So you can have rough textures, smooth textures, grainy, like there are all different words that you can use obviously for texture. You can even go into the material potentially. So you could say like the leathery gloves or the leathery steering wheel or like the wooden desk, you know, and you can go into deeper, like I got a splinter from the coarse wooden desk. That's great little sensory image there. The surfaces, that can often imply the texture or the touch, sorry. So like metal versus wood versus plastic versus glass versus whatever, stone, brick, whatever. And then temperature. Temperature is one you probably do a bit more, but again, just push this. Make sure that you let the reader know whether it's a hot day or a cold day, snowy, windy, whatever, yeah? Try and let them know. And do you see how this adds to the character? So if the character is on a roller coaster, maybe they're like, you know, you could do a really interesting thing with temperature because they could be like sweating because like baking hot because they're anxious, right? But you could also have like they're grabbing onto the cold metal bar and the freezing wind is blowing in their face. You're really developing how the character comes across by adding in various temperatures, various kind of climate for the setting, for the character, for what's going on. So that's touch. And then finally, taste. So taste got this funny little picture here. So I thought this was a cool like little merge between English and biology, actually, or anatomy. So with taste, it's similar to smell. Taste and smell are actually really linked. That's why when you have colds and you can't breathe through your nose, quite often you're not going to be able to taste food properly. That's one of the reasons COVID had that symptom, I think, as well. It messed up what's called the olfactory nerve. Anyway, getting into the geeky science of it. But so the strength, whether it's pleasant or unpleasant, but then with taste, you've also got 5 things that you can talk about. You've got salt, sweet, bitter, sour, and umami. Now, umami isn't in here, unfortunately. Umami is a funny little word. I don't know if some of you have heard of it, but that's how meaty something is. And this is a weird little thing, but a lot of restaurants will add this really bad thing to your takeaway food called MSG. And what MSG, monosodium glutamate, what MS is really bad for our bodies. It's actually illegal now, really. But if they add MSG to the food, it tricks your tongue into thinking that something is more meaty, even if it's not. And, you know, from our like our bodies, like understanding what nutrients we need, if something is meatier, we get more addicted to it because we think that it's giving us more good proteins and minerals and whatever. I don't know where that is on the tongue, so I'm sorry about that. But we do have bitter comes from the back of the tongue, sour comes from the edges of the tongue, salty comes from this kind of front, but not quite the tip of the tongue, and then sweet comes from the very tip of the tongue. Now, why am I telling you this? One, it's because it's an easy way to remember salt, sweet, bitter, sour, umami. You can use this even if you're not doing a piece on something to do with food. So I had a student do a roller coaster piece the other day, and he talked about how he could taste the air. That's then known, this is the final thing I suppose in here, as synesthesia. Synesthesia. So this is a mixing up of the senses. And that can be really powerful as well if you want to try and add something really effective, an unusual sort of technique in your writing, mix up the senses. A simple way that you could imagine this, let's say that we're mixing up vision with sound. So you've probably heard this phrase before, like say if I was wearing like a really bright pink flowery shirt with tigers and crazy skulls or something, you might understand if someone said, oh, Adam's wearing a really loud shirt. Yeah. And obviously the shirt isn't literally loud, it's visually loud. But do you see how that's mixing up the visual elements of the pink and crazy or whatever with sound? So synesthesia, you can mix this up. So he talked about how he could taste the air, and he was using that synesthesia to show how he was really panicking on the roller coaster. But one other practical thing, which is kind of fun, you can try this tonight with your dinners or whenever you're watching this, breakfast, lunch, whenever, even if you've got a snack. If you want something to taste sweeter, actually use the front of your tongue to taste it more, because your tongue is actually looking for sweetness at the front there. Yeah. So sweet things will taste sweeter at the front of the tongue versus at the back. If you want something to taste more sour, put it to the edges of your mouth. So say you've got like, I don't know, lemon or something. If you want to get the real sourness of the lemon, put it to the edges of your tongue. If you want the lemon to taste slightly sweeter, taste it with the tip of your tongue at the front. Salty's kind of in the middle there. Like my favorite one though is bitter. If you want to try and taste the bitterness of foods a bit more, like if something's really sweet, but you actually want to calm that down, actually taste it through the back of your tongue more, and it'll actually soften out the sweetness of it. You can actually change the way you taste foods. I think that's really cool. Anyway, so you use the 5 senses. Those are the 5 senses. Now, I hadn't really prepared a specific thing for this as a model answer, which I know I normally do. But what I'm thinking is I might actually just very quickly get a model from one of my students who wrote this very quick about a week ago. So that might actually be useful today to just look at how this looks in action. So bear with me just 1 second as I get this. And the reason it's really useful is because he actually broke it down into these different bits. So he did one on mac and cheese. It happened to be his favorite food, the same as mine. But he then also, he did one on, oh, no, that was my mac and cheese one, sorry, that was me. Then he did it on pasta, my bad. And then he did the theme park one, which I was actually just talking to you about. Now, this isn't perfect. I mean, Dylan is in year 9. He's a very good student for year 9. But yeah, let's have a look at this as a bit of a model. And hopefully this will give you a little bit of useful information on how you might improve your 5 senses writing. So this is the roller coaster ride, like I said. So he broke it down into touch and smell and taste and vision and hearing. As year 10s and year 11s, I would recommend to you actually don't break it down unless you're just trying to practice. In the real thing, obviously, you're not going to write a section on touch, a section on smell, a section on taste. You're going to blur these together to make a more effective piece. But let's read it. So, using my strength, I heaved down the long silver barrier over my chest. It was cold, freezing, in fact. So here we've got surface, touch, sorry, and we've got temperature. The cart we were on for the roller coaster was tightly packed, with the sides feeling prickly and different. So the idea that as he's anxious and also as he's crammed into the roller coaster, his sides feel prickly, again, sense of touch. Then we zoomed off. My hands flew off and I could only feel the air on them. Soon the air was blasting in my face and throwing my hair everywhere as well. So this also is sense of touch here. Okay, good. We zoomed up and the aroma of the air was filled with the luscious smell of waffles. It felt as if I was an angel flying in the air, swimming in that smell of waffles. So we've got a bit of repetition there. Also, there was a deep burning smell of roasting nuts, which filled the air perfectly. That's a pretty good one, because when we've been to amusement parks, you know, Chessington, whatever, Thorpe Park and stuff, quite often there's all these different like food trucks and different smells that we get filling the air. So that links nicely to the roller coaster as well. I could taste the air, but this was not what I was concentrating on. We were starting smoothly without any bumps, but now we were heading upwards. I wanted to distract myself by tasting the air, but I couldn't taste anything. But the man next to me was eating his cotton candy and filming himself. He must love this stuff. This is where this piece needs a little bit of tightening up. But obviously the idea that he's imagining tasting the cotton candy, he can taste the air. I think that this is more linking to panic in this piece, but still, I shut my eyes and thought about the soft, cloudy melting in my mouth, which would make me happen. So, and he's also using a sense of taste here to develop the character, because the character is nervous. So the character is like closing his eyes or her eyes and trying to think of something delicious to get rid of some of their anxiety on this roller coaster. Then I shot open my eyes and found myself dropping what felt like 100 miles an hour into a splash of water. We splashed loudly and it wasn't over there yet. Now, this is actually hearing, splashing loudly. So sometimes he's put a few things differently. We were making our way up an even higher drop. From here, we could see everything. I could even see a little chubby kid asking his mum for the waffles I was dreaming about before. That's quite funny. It's linking back to the waffle smell from earlier. You get the vision of the kid that's asking for food. He could have done more with the visual, like, you know, he could have looked at the screaming faces to the left or right, the fact that he was miles up in the air and he could sort of see the clouds over him or whatever. You could do more with the visual, but there's a few things in here. And then finally, I could hear people screaming at the top of their lungs, and a sharp right on the roller coaster made a loud zooming sound. So that's onomatopoeia, the zooming of the roller coaster, which increased the atmosphere. A final drop splashed us down with impact, and the ride ended well, or ended the ride well. So this is not a perfect piece by any means, but it is a good starting point. It gives you a sense of how to use touch and smell and taste and vision and hearing. This is the sort of description I want you to be adding into your pieces. And then on top of that, you also want to be adding more about the character's thoughts and feelings as an extra layer. But hopefully you can see how this will immerse the reader into the characters and into the setting. This is how you get higher marks. This is not a perfect piece, but this is the right idea, the right sort of progress, especially for a student that still has 2 years to develop their ideas before they sit their GCSEs. Okay, so the next thing that I want to talk to you about, I've got just about enough time to do this today, is this idea of FOPPS. Now, most of my students, I've talked to them about FOPS, which is this focal points, focal shifts, order of information, pace, and sentence forms. The other big one I want you to understand, we talked about this a little bit last week, is perspective as well. I think that perspectives is also really important. And all of this is really building up how you're going to make a really effective piece. So this is all part of the planning phase. You want, as you come up with your ideas for a piece, to think about several major focal points that you want the reader to see by the time they finish reading your piece. So, you know, thinking about the roller coaster piece that we've just done, you want to have maybe the focal point of getting onto the roller coaster, or like pulling the bar down. That's a pretty big focal point, right? You maybe want to have the screaming people in the roller coaster with you. That's another focal point. Maybe you want to have the big splash at the end. That's another focal point. So before you even write your piece, make sure you've got some good focal points. Yeah, this will help you to write better. And then focal shifts is where you start to deliberately think, okay, so let's take that first focal point, pulling the bar down over you. So you're strapping yourself into the roller coaster, right? There might then be a focal shift, which has some sort of an effect. So the one that comes to my head that we could add and develop to this piece is he pulls the cold metal bar down over him. Yeah, so he's secured in, and then it maybe focal shifts to his first person perspective, sort of links to perspective here. He's looking out, and maybe he's on the front carriage. So his legs are dangling over the edge and he can see down 100 meters. So he's sort of dangling there. And that focal shift will help to kind of create that tension and that suspense that he's about to do this roller coaster ride. Or you could do something totally different. You could have that, you know, he's very comfortable and he's just in his seat. I think about this ride I did a few years ago called the Incredible Hulk ride. Really chill. You get in, you put the bar down, and then I did know this before I get on the ride, but it's the fastest ride to get from 0 to 100 miles an hour in the world. So it gets you from 0 to 100, I think, in like 1 second or something nuts. So, you know, I was sat there chilling, and then suddenly just took off and went high as well. And you just go from it. So that could be a focal shift, right? I'm just calm, I'm just whatever, ready for the ride. And then, oh, it suddenly takes me off. Yeah, that's a focal shift. You want to think a lot about your order of information. Now with this one, what you really want to be thinking about is, I should have put a picture of this in, so my apologies for that, is what's called Frytags Pyramid. Now, most of you know about Frytags Pyramid from lessons with me or from school, but very quickly, just going through Frytags Pyramid, what Frytags Pyramid is it'd be good if I knew where I was going here. Here we go. Frytags Pyramid is basically thinking about where things within your story belong. So the introduction or the exposition should be where you are introducing your characters and the setting a bit. The rising movement, also known as rising action, should be where you're building up to a climax. The climax obviously is the major, most exciting bit of the piece. Then you have a falling action, and then you have, this version is very specific. It's not actually necessarily catastrophe. It has an ending point. It could be tragic, it could be catastrophe, or it could also be known as denouement, which is the wrapping up, the happily ever after, okay? So as you're thinking about your creative piece, you want to think about the order of the information, why you should put certain things in certain areas effectively, okay? Wow, okay, that just took forever. Then the other thing you want to be thinking about before you even start writing your story is the pace. You want to be thinking about where in the story is there tension, and where in the story is there maybe excitement, sadness, you know, just generally where are the emotions. And if you're building excitement, obviously you want a faster pace. If you want sadness, you want a slower pace. This will also affect the language you use. But again, before you even write the story, ideally you have a sense of a couple of moments that are going to be maybe tense or fearful or sad, a couple of moments that are going to be maybe exciting or joyful or happy. Yeah. And you plan that out a little bit, where the pace is going to be fast, where it's going to be slow. And of course, with pace, the way that you actually modulate for this is, you know, more punctuation is slower pace, less punctuation is faster pace, more short sentences is slower pace, more long sentences is faster pace, right? So you actually are even planning out your punctuation a little bit and your sentence forms by thinking about the pace. Perspective, really there are two major types. There's third person and first person. Think about your story, think about what's going to be most effective. Is it better to be all from one character, or is it better to be from an omniscient narrator? The other thing you can do, this is sort of going back to last week a little bit, but there are going to be some overlaps sometimes, is whether you want it to be a viewpoint narrative, in which case there's going to be more than one perspective. It's going to be several characters that have their viewpoints. So for those of you that did Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde, for example, that is a viewpoint narrative. So most of the novel is through Mr. Utterson, but then at the end, we've got a letter from Dr. Lanyon, so it's from his viewpoint, and then you've got one from Dr. Jekyll, so it's from his viewpoint. So it's a viewpoint narrative, 3 different viewpoints. And then obviously we've already talked about sentence forms through the pace, but it's good for you to think about where you're going to be putting in those slower, more emphasized bits, and where you're going to be putting in those more fast, exciting, or panicky bits. So that, in a nutshell, is the FOPPS. The other thing that I want you to realize is, as you're going through this, this does link back to being able to read structure from other people. So probably next week, I'm going to be going through the structure of things that you have read. That will be in a different video in the 3rd week of the series. So make sure that you're looking out and checking out that. Other than that, I think that that's everything that I wanted to cover with you today. So we've gone through the 5 senses, we've gone through FOPPS. All of this will really help you with your planning section. If you have any comments, please comment below. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. I'll see you next time. All right, take care. Good work.